Insanity. The definition of this word is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I think this perfectly summarizes the approach that the Maple Leafs have taken for what feels like decades now. Toronto was just dominated on home ice by the Florida Panthers in Game 7 of their Round 2 series, which means yet another early playoff exit for the Buds. And I don't know what's more ironic at this point, Brad Marchand defending the Leafs saying that he rooted for them as a kid and then scoring the final goal of the series, or Mitch Marner telling the team that he needs them to wake up after putting on what was a terrible showing in Round 2. Either way, the Leafs put up what was their most impressive playoff run in a long time, but still, they have fallen vastly short of expectations and their ultimate goal. With expiring contracts, underperforming players, and questionable leadership, Toronto now faces what will be the most challenging offseason of the Core 4 era. So today, let's break down this year and playoff run for the Toronto Maple Leafs. What went wrong this time around, and what needs to happen for Toronto to move past this ugly timeline of their hockey club. This was the first time I actively rooted for the Toronto Maple Leafs with the Boston Bruins being out of the playoffs. A lot of you guys said, hey, this is the team that's going to win it all this year, and even though I had my reservations, I still went all in on the Maple Leafs. And this is confidently the first time I can say, heartbreak for the Maple Leafs, it just hits different when they underperform this way. Now, there's a lot of people to blame and a lot to get into today, but in order for us to fully understand what happened to Toronto this year, we need to go all the way back to the beginning of the playoffs. The Leafs entered the playoffs after winning their division for the first time since 2020, and if you exclude the bubble playoffs, which for some reason people like to do, they actually haven't won a division title since 1999. Now, fans viewed this as a momentum boost for the boys. In winning this title, you land a softer, less experienced first-round opponent in the Senators, and your two biggest rivals in the Panthers and the Lightning would have to face off in round 1 in a gauntlet, which was perfect. Perfect is a bit of an overstatement, I would say, though, because while Toronto was anticipating an easier first-round matchup, I think the Senators put up a good fight. Yes, they went down 0-3, but they won 2 games after that, forced OT in a lot of those matchups, and had the puck bounced a different way, we could be talking about that series as a completely different outcome. But hey, give the Leafs their flowers, they won in the first round, and they advanced. The other thing that made it a little bit more challenging for them, though, is the fact that the Florida Panthers took care of the Lightning pretty easily in 5. I think most people anticipated the Lightning to come out on top of that one just based on how much hockey the Cats have played over the past couple of years. But still, you got to give them their flowers, too, because they looked like the defending Stanley Cup champs. I'm not going to rehash the whole Ottawa vs. Toronto series, though, so if you guys want to check that out in a recap that I made a few weeks ago, I'll have that link for you guys right here. You can check that out after this video. With all that being said, the Leafs are moving on to face the Florida Panthers in round 2, and this was a chance for them to redeem themselves after what was an embarrassing playoff run just 2 years ago. Games 1 and 2, the Leafs really showed up, pulling off 2 gutsy wins against the Panthers, even when everyone expected them to lay down and give up. Game 3, it was a little bit of a different story. At first, it felt like Toronto was about to put a stranglehold on this series. That is, until they blew a lead to lose in overtime, giving the Panthers just enough momentum to claw their way back into this series. And claw, they did. Games 3 through 5 were a different story, though. Same old Leafs choking it out, giving the Panthers some life back in the series, and in Game 5 embarrassing themselves on home ice to the point where fans were just completely fed up, brought back to a traumatic place that they've been experiencing for what feels like decades now. This is where the fan base of Toronto really turned on their team. Years of trauma started to unfold. I've seen this all before. The sky is falling notion started to come back to life. And the Leafs, were they about to choke yet another playoff series? Well, Game 6, Toronto actually responded, not only shutting out the Panthers, but getting a goal from Austin Matthews, who had never scored a goal in the second round of the playoffs, giving them an even additional boost of momentum just from their captain getting back in the series. The sun was shining just a little bit brighter in Toronto, and the Leafs actually had an opportunity to take advantage of winning their division title, having home ice in Game 7, something we're not really typically used to seeing for the Maple Leafs. This being my first time supporting the Leafs in a playoff run, I really felt the delusion, and I can tell you, it's intoxicating. This team is so talented. Their defense is rebuilt. Joel Wool, our Wonder Wool, with that song, it just brings you in. He's coming off a shutout and now gets the chance to save the season on home ice. It's our year. Yeah, not really. The Leafs went out and did the most Leafy thing imaginable, losing 6-1 on home ice in Game 7. They even gave their fans and their barn some life with a goal, only to be scored on less than a minute later. And to cap things off, my childhood favorite player, Brad Marchand, would place the cherry on top to end the team's season. And real quickly, before we talk about the end of season stuff and what the future is going to look like, I just want to make a few individual points on the core four. I thought William Nylander was solid like he usually is, but again, where was he in the biggest game of the year? Austin Matthews, he did look uncomfortable throughout this whole playoff run, and not to make excuses because everyone's dealing with injuries, but I would not be shocked if he comes out saying that he was playing with a broken wrist or some kind of back injury, because through most of the season and the playoffs, he just didn't look like himself. Mitch Marner and John Tavares, they're the guys that I think look the most uninterested, and that could be because of their contracts, it could be because they're just not playoff guys, but those are the two that I think most people want to criticize from this playoff series against the Panthers because they were just complete no-shows. And while Wool was pretty solid during some of these games, I just think the overall loss of momentum from Stolarz going out with that injury was just a complete killer for the Leafs, ultimately just leading to their demise. So what's next in Toronto? I think the biggest focus point of the offseason is going to be on John Tavares and Mitch Marner, and whether or not this may have been their final game wearing a Leafs sweater. As the Toronto Sun so elegantly put, 2 years ago Kyle Dubas was fired and Brad Treliving was hired as general manager. First change. 1 year ago Sheldon Keefe was shown the door and Craig Berube was brought in as the new head coach. 2 changes. Along the way, the defensive corps, they've been revamped. 3 changes. The goaltending, it has finally been set after years of mediocrity. 4 changes. But you want to know the one thing that hasn't changed? The core 4. And I think it's past due for a shakeup, isn't it? It's time. It doesn't matter what you do to surround these players. There's an intangible within Nylander, Matthews, Marner, and Tavares that just does not exist. You can't teach competitive will. You can't teach that dog mentality. You can't teach someone that feeling of having your back against the wall and having to put your all into a game, leaving yourself out there with nothing left to prove. It's just not something you can instill into a player. It's something you're just naturally born with. And when you have 4 players making around $50 million combined, who all have that similar softness, and then you try to build around them year after year, and to see it not work, I think you would be absolutely crazy to try and run this back even one more time. Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares have not won a Game 7 together in Toronto, and they have not been able to lead the Leafs to success when it absolutely is required. For Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander, it's 0-6 in Game 7s together. So what is management waiting for? Why do they seem to think that the next year will finally be the year even though it just never is? Matthews again said that this is a tight-knit group. If so, where was the effort in Game 7 for each other? Where is playing for the guy sitting next to you in the dressing room? Where was the heart? I truly believe at this point that management is so scared of how the fan base would react to a big move that there's a real possibility they're not going to do anything. We saw it in a lot of these games. The Leafs are treated like gods, like Marner has alluded to in the past, but the minute they start to mess up, you see the jerseys being thrown onto the ice, people losing their minds, throwing beers against them. It's honestly just embarrassing from the fan base. You need to rally around this group regardless of how much trauma there is. And at this point, I think there's just too much trauma for them to ever really get over this pressure, or for the fan base to ever really rally around this group, because in the end they just believe that they're too soft, and management, they're too afraid to go against the fan base at this point. The changes that I would recommend is moving on from Mitch Marner to use that money elsewhere and acquire a player who better complements some of your other core pieces like Matthews and Nylander. Marner has done some incredible things for the organization, but really he's just a regular season player. And I believe the Leafs feel that way too, because they were willing to move off of him for mikkorantanen earlier in the year because they just don't think he's a playoff riser and he can't get it done in those big moments. I would also say it's time to let John Tavares walk as well. You stripped him of his captaincy because you didn't think he was the best leader for this group. And with the season that he just put up this year, I can't imagine he's going to sign for anything less than $8 million. And with Matthew Knies needing that new contract, I think they would be way better off giving him that payday since he was one of the few guys who managed to make an impact throughout their run. I don't know who you could grab to replace Mitch Marner's production, and that will be a significant loss for the Leafs. Keep that in mind. You're not going to get a player who's talent for talent as good as Mitch Marner, who's as skillful as this player, and who puts up those same regular season numbers that he's been putting up since he became a Toronto Maple Leaf. But I do think at this point, you would just be crazy to bring him back and sign him to a ticket of like $13 million a year. He's just not worth it, especially in those big moments. Hey, you never know. There are some players out there who you could bring in. I think Brad Marchand's going to be available. Maybe he would like to be a Toronto Maple Leafs. He did say he watched him growing up. Who knows? But in all seriousness, it's going to be a tough loss for them, and there will be some players out there, especially with the offer sheet stuff that's been coming around and people saying that that's going to be a popular option this year. So maybe they can explore that if they feel the need. But hey, this is the end of the Toronto Maple Leafs season and my general thoughts about what their future should look like if they want to come back and be a better team. As a temporary Leafs fan, this has been a fun ride. Hopefully I don't have to do this again next year and the Boston Bruins will be back in the playoffs. And if you are a Leafs fan, remember, support your team. Don't throw your jerseys on the ice. Don't throw your drinks on the ice. You got to back these guys. Even though they have been very disappointing over the past couple of years, they really need your support. But let me know what you guys think about the Leafs season in general. How do you feel about their playoff exit? What do you think they should do in the future? And if you guys enjoyed this video, I have some more content for you right here on the screen. Be sure to give this one a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this. Thank you guys as always for watching. I will see you guys in the next episode.